Russell. I'm Weber County's Economic Development Director and Government Relations, and I just want to thank all of you for taking some time out of your evening to come down tonight to our listening session with our questions and answers. So I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of the housekeeping tonight and give you an idea of how this meeting is going to proceed, and then hopefully we'll be able to address some of your questions and concerns tonight. So we're going to start out, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, talk about the project area and where we went and where we're going with it, and then do an introduction to our panelists. And then those of you that signed up to ask a question, you'll have a minute to come up and ask the panelists a question, and the panelists will have 3 minutes to answer the question. We've got 10 people signed up. If we have a little extra time and it's looking like we can fit some more questions in, we'll absolutely do that. But we're trying to be respectful of everybody's time tonight. If there's additional questions that truly just don't get answered, I've left my business cards in the back. You're welcome to give me a buzz tomorrow or drop me an email. Be happy to answer those questions for you. So just a little bit of history on this project. A little over a year ago, I reached out to the Inland Port and had a discussion with Ben Hart about looking at the West Weber corridor as a possible location for them to work with us in creating a project area. One of the impetuses for that was our Western Weber General Plan. Back in 2022, the Commission adopted our Western Weber General Plan. This is a land use plan, but it's a little bit bigger than a land use plan. It's an actual general plan. It's a master plan that addresses development needs, land application. It addresses the types of zoning, the types of business recruitment, the types of housing that we're looking at developing out there. As you know, with most of the states, particularly in the West, we're seeing an exponential amount of growth coming into our state, particularly into northern Utah as a whole. So in order for us to really get a grip on that and to do smart development, the county was very proactive. I believe starting in 2018, Charlie, if I'm mistaken, 2018, started working towards putting together a general plan for the Western Weber corridor. There's a lot of challenges in that corridor. That's my domain. That's my responsibility, is to help develop that corridor out in a smart and environmentally safe way. My background is in large-scale economic development and community development. I lived in the South. I come from the South. I worked on the state level in Atlanta and in Georgia, assisting communities in doing large-scale economic and community development. This was a challenge taking on this area because it has zero infrastructure. It has a lot of potential, and it also has a lot of challenges. One of our biggest challenges is that we've got a lot of farmland out there that is being retired. Farmers are retiring, or they're passing their properties onto the next generation, and that's not an interest, is to continue doing farming. So we're dealing with that interesting trend in economic development. We're dealing with a severe housing crisis, not just in the state, but in the United States in general. We're also dealing with environmental issues such as the Great Salt Lake, water, sewer, and I know a lot of you are very concerned about the wetlands out there, and we'll talk about that tonight. So in the past 2.5 years that I've been working here, we've been partnering with some amazing organizations and groups. We've been partnering with all of our local water and sewer districts, Wasatch Front Regional Council, UDOT, our state legislators. We've got really great open lines of communication with the property owners as well as the developers that are interested in developing in that corridor. But once again, our challenge is we'd love to see development out there, but we want to see it done correctly, and we want to see it done in a fashion that's going to be able to provide generations of sustainability, both economic and environmental. So with that being said, we've been working in that corridor for many years, and Chris Roybal will be here in just a little bit. He's running late in traffic. He's with the Northern Utah Economic Alliance. They're one of our partnerships on the state level that help us do business recruitment. And we're having difficulty in getting the developers that are going to be sustainable out there because of the lack of infrastructure, particularly water and sewer. So When Ben and I met last year, we had the opportunity to really take a deep dive into that area and to see if the inland port was going to be a good partnership fit. And that's what the inland port is to Weber County. I need to stress that inland port is one of our partners. The driver of this project is the Western Weber General Plan. On your agendas tonight, there's a QR code, and that links to our website, and you can find our Western Weber General Plan on our website. Our Western Weber General Plan, and Charlie can jump in at any time on this. He is our senior planner. Our Western Weber General Plan truly is one of those unique opportunities to really prepare for the growth that is hitting us and to make sure that we put the right infrastructure and that we're doing the right type of development out in that area, because it's a very unique area. It has very unique natural features. It has very unique economic features. So I started meeting with Ben's team, and we started looking at that area to see if it was going to be a good fit. We did several work sessions, public work sessions with the commission, and then we had a couple public meetings where we adopted resolutions. So at this point in the process, Weber County Commission has already adopted a resolution that is promoting a Western Weber project plan area. That project plan is going to go before the Inland Port Authority Board on Monday, this coming Monday on the 20th. So what we're here to do tonight is to answer any of your questions and address some of the concerns that you have regarding the role that the Inland Port will be playing in our Western Weber General Plan. Part of the resolution has a clause in it that created a committee, and this is very unique to our specific plan. As it relates to the other inland ports in the state of Utah. Our inland port project area has a committee that is ran and selected by our county commission. Any type of development that's going to be going out in this area has to go through that committee and has to be vetted before it goes to the Inland Port Authority for a vote. So we've put a couple clauses into our agreement and into our partnership that still allows us to make sure that Western Weber General Plan is the governing document of the development area in that area. Additionally, our development process addresses natural resources and physical resources. I want Charlie just to talk just really briefly about how our development process works as it relates to natural resources, specifically wetlands, as well as maybe some of the other types of processes and regulations that the county is mandated to accomplish before they do development.
She said briefly because you put a microphone in front of my face and nothing is ever brief.
That is true. He's the one that may have to put the timer on tonight.
She said 3 minutes. So let's see what Let's see what happens.
Let's keep it lower.
Lower than 3? Oh, okay. 30 seconds.
We want to give these people a chance to talk tonight, Charlie.
When it comes to wetlands specifically, wetlands mitigation is really important. The federal government regulates wetlands mitigation. If there are wetlands on a piece of property, it has to be identified. The Army Corps needs to be called, and there needs to be a wetland delineation conducted by a qualified wetlands engineer. If they're there, they can't be just run over or developed over or anything like that. They need to be either protected in place or there needs to be compensation for their existence. So in some cases, and I don't know what the ratio is here by the Army Corps, but in some cases you could get, if you displace an acre of wetland in one location, you have to replace it with 5 acres of wetland in the same general location so that you're not overall decreasing the amount of wetland and wildlife area that's there. You're actually increasing it.
That was perfect. Thank you. And I really want to stress that in addition to the county, the Inland Port Authority has zero ability to circumvent our codes, which is our Western Weber General Plan, state codes or national codes as it comes to development processes, whether it be wetlands, whether it be types of development that are allowed out in that area according to our land use plan, and types of development that are allowed according to our unfortunate non-attainment status. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our non-attainment status. Do you guys know what that means? We are a non-attainment area, and it is incredibly unfortunate. So any development that we bring out into that West Weber corridor has to comply with our state and federal non-attainment status. And what that means is we have really polluted air, and it's a serious issue. There's one positive to that, and that is any development we bring out there has to bring in filtration. So they not only have to mitigate what they would be producing, they have to mitigate what's already there. So anything we bring in is going to help clean up some of that air quality that we have and those issues that we have in that area. So our general plan truly does address that. The state and federal regulations address that. And we are moving forward with a smart development plan for this area. And that is one of the reasons why we have brought the Inland Port in as a partner. They provide resources that we currently don't have in order for us to lay a foundation of infrastructure that's going to be sustainable and economically feasible for a long period of time. Water and sewer is a major issue. I work with Little Mountain Service Area, the sewer provider out there. We've got several big projects going on. We're one of the few entities in that area that have reusability. We have a discharge permit into the Salt Lake as well as the ability to reuse water. So I work very closely with Weber Basin Water and Central Weber Sewer to make sure that any type of system that we put out there and any type of industry that we're putting out there, we are looking at being able to either do reuse, repurpose water, or to be able to discharge into the Salt Lake. So we're very cognizant of our environmental challenges in that area, and we're working very closely with our partners. And with that being said, I just want to reiterate that this is about our Western Weber General Plant. Our Inland Port folks are our partners, just like our Weber Basin Water folks are our partners, and our Little Mountain folks, and all of our different partners that we have out there, and on our local level as well as on the regional level and the state level. So that's a little bit of background information on the project area, and I'm going to open it up to questions now. We'll start with person number one. Jessica's going to keep time for you. Please keep your comment question to 1 minute, and please ask us a question because we have 3 minutes for you to respond to that question. This is about asking questions and getting a little deeper dive on some of the information that we're able to present for you tonight. On our panel is Charlie. This is the Weber County's senior planner, as you just heard from. Chris Roywell just walked in. He's with Northern Utah Economic Alliance. They are a partnership organization that helps us with our recruitment in economic development, our recruitment and marketing for that particular area. We've got Ben Hart with Inland Port Authority, and we have Daniel Stevens, who is with Black Pine Development. Daniel Stevens is a property owner in that area, and I do need to stress that one of the reasons that we even continued moving forward with the Inland Port Partnership is that our property owners in the proposed area all came to us and said, please, we want to be a part of this. This is something we want to do. And this was driven by economics. It was driven by environmentalists. It was driven by infrastructure, but it was predominantly driven by private property ownership and a way for us to actually execute our Western Weber General Plan. So with that being said, who we got first on the list? Oh, it's right there. You're first. All right. State your name and where you're from, and ask your question.
Well, it's not that simple, but my name's Darren Perry, former chairman of the Shoshone Nation. History of Utah started before 1847. My people used the area that's being proposed as a gathering place. We celebrated there, we had ceremony there, and we died there. Many of our people are buried there. So think about that as you plow up your property. Think about my people. The system says that we can extract, deplete, destroy, and develop a piece of property. But maybe we should start asking ourselves, should we? And at what cost will it come to future generations? What do you value? That's my question. Do you value clean air? Do you value clean water? What's your value system? Because all development isn't good development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Does the panel want to respond?
Just briefly, I just want to make sure, as far as cultural and sensitive heritage areas are in the Western Weber area, is everything that you're aware of mapped, and is all the data given to the State Historic Preservation Society?
If it hasn't been, it will be.
Okay, please.
That's the process.
Okay.
Very good. So that is one of the first things that we need. The county has a resource management plan. We're required by the state to have a resource management plan, and one of the items we're supposed to check for is cultural resources such as that. Okay, we definitely need to know where those are. So if you get a chance, maybe after the meeting we can touch base and exchange information.
Patty? I want to state that all the properties that are in the Laporte area are private. The county does not own one piece of those properties. So it would be up to the private property owners to be aware of that and work through the state as they're doing that mitigation.
It's up to the private person.
Yes, because
They don't have to do the research, they're just waiting for the public to present to them the information. That seems backward.
if there's significant resources, Charlie, how does that work with your development process?
So if it's mapped, if we know, if the state knows that it exists, and that information is available, it will show up on our maps.
If someone is aware of this and makes it available to you, but you're not doing the research.
No, that research, when you say we're not doing that research, what do you mean by that?
That's through the state Department of Natural Resources. That's all done through the DNR. Yeah, that's not a county function. That has to be done on the state level.
But we will gather that information if it is available. We gathered what we could when we created our county resource management plan. We did that one in 2017, and we worked with the state. We worked with the Wasatch Front Regional Council and a few other state agencies to do that. So if we don't have that information now, we definitely need to get it.
Okay. First of all, thank you for holding this session. We're very concerned about many things, but one of my main concerns is when this land was designated, we weren't in a drought. The Salt Lake wasn't endangered, and I don't think at that time we knew the importance of wetlands. So I was reassured that you're paying attention to those. But I wondered if you could show us on the map that you did have up of what businesses you hope to attract and where exactly they would be on, well, the map's not there, but on the map, because it's hard to envision all the industry that you hope to bring in and how they could be situated in order not to have to create roads over the wetlands or affect the wetlands at all. And yeah, that's only one of my questions.
Panelists?
Well, I'll address that, and then happy to have the other panelists jump in. There is infrastructure already out there. There's already industrial development out there. As you may be aware, Compass Minerals, Western Zirconium Corporation have had operations out there for over 30 years. So 12th Street has a road that runs all the way down parallel to the UP track line that's been there, for 30 plus years. So we're not, you're not having to build over the question was about wetlands. I'll let Mr. Stevens speak to this, but all the developers that I know don't have a lot of interest in trying to develop a lot of property on severely hampered wetlands area. If you look out there, there's really not a lot of natural waterway systems that are running through that property. You have the Weber River and you have a couple of other canal systems, but the property in large part does not have any major waterway systems running through it. There is a high water table, but that doesn't constitute wetlands. We have done some wetland studies out there on some of the core properties where industrial companies are looking to locate next to the area where Compass Minerals and Western Zirconium are. So wetland studies will be performed, engineering studies will be performed before anybody ever develops. From my understanding in working this property the last 3 or 4 years, I don't see a lot of jurisdictional wetlands out there to have to be mitigated in the first place. So I think that's the good news. If they do, there's plenty of property to mitigate it, but I don't see that as being part of the overall master plan as we have surveyed that property over the last 4 years.
I think it's important to note, as you think about that and think about the wetlands that are out there, the state owns a significant amount of land that is out there. The majority of the wetlands that you see and you enjoy that are out there are on state-owned land. There are privately owned lands that do have some wetlands on there, but as we've been working with a lot of those private landowners, we probably have half a dozen or so who have already engaged the process or started to engage the process, and the Army Corps is finding very minimal wetlands on their lands where the maps show that there are supposed to be wetlands. And maybe that's an effect of the drought, but the Army Corps is pretty good at delineating where historically water has been as well. And they're not finding that when they painted the broad brush on their wetlands map, that there is quite as much as they thought there were at the time. But I do want Daniel to respond to that. But before he does so, I want to maybe poke you at talking about the wetlands area that is directly adjacent to the project that you were just working on.
Yeah, happy to take this one from a developer perspective. Like has been mentioned, working with the Army Corps of Engineers and developing property is not something that we look forward to. The Army Corps is very strict in their guidelines, and as they should be. And so when we do have wetlands on our property, we take it very seriously, working with environmental consultants very early on in the process. And so we engage with them. A lot of people don't know that when you pull the maps on the Army Corps of Engineers website, a lot of that imagery was done in the early 1980s. And so a lot of it's outdated and needs to be updated. And that's why you see constant delineations happening. And the other thing that happens is with each new president that goes into office, they tend to play around with the rules at the EPA. And wetlands often get redefined of what is a wetland. And so we as developers constantly have to engage environmental consultants to make sure that we're abiding by the current laws that are in place and abiding by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. One thing that Charlie talked about was we do have a wetland on our property that's substantial in nature. And what we decided to do as a developer is to not only enhance the wetland, but to surround it by a park. So we're donating 35 acres adjacent to this wetland, and then we're actually donating $1 million to be able to upgrade and put in a trail system, enhance the vegetation, put in a structure that people can, and some trail or some benches and things like that people can actually go out and enjoy the wetland area and the surrounding area by turning it into a public park. So there's unique things that we can do as developers when we have projects of scale like that. But we take wetlands very seriously, and we engage the best consultants that we can to make sure that we're abiding by the laws.
Thank you, Daniel. David?
Hi, I'm Dave Timmerman, live in Ogden City. I'm actually part of the Ogden 100 group, which was a group which successfully petitioned Ogden City to pass the clean renewable energy for Ogden itself. And that's what I'm concerned about here, is what's it going to look like? Is it a sustainable thing? And will we have monitoring equipment in place to detect those days when it's too dusty, too dangerous? Will we have clean renewable energy like Ogden City has committed to? Is that going to be part of the discussion, or will that be part of it? Those are the things that I am concerned about, the sources and, of course, all of the wildlife. But my final worry is this started out as just under 1,000-acre project, and now it has expanded to 90. So it seems extreme to me, and those are my concerns. Thank you.
It's not 90,000 acres. No, your minute is up.
My minute is up.
Your minute is up. I'm going to have Ben address the area and why the properties were included, and then I'll address the renewable energy component, because that is a big part of what we're doing on that corridor. It will be a renewable energy hub.
Well, in terms of, I think the part of that I'll address is how did we go from something that was around 1,000 acres to something that was much more significant. As we looked at this area, I think there were a couple things that we took into consideration. One is always ultimately, what does the county want to see? And I think Stephanie's outlined that very well. I think the other thing that we look at is how do we bring in something that is holistic for this entire area? So as we're thinking about this area, and we're thinking about the future, I like the question before, Patty, in terms of what are we going to do for future generations? How do we protect this for future generations? I think we really do have a tremendous opportunity. And I'm really, really tempted to change the name from just a project area, or that we should change the name from just a project area to conservation and project area. Because I think that's what we're going to see a lot of in here. I think we're going to see a significant focus on protecting the wetlands. And I will say that I think we're going to be able to do this in a way that we have not seen around the Great Salt Lake before. I think there's been a lot of people who've always said, well, we'll just never see development in that area. There's been a lot of wetlands that died because people had that approach. Well, it's never going to develop here or there, and then it does. And so before we get to that point, how do we get to proactive planning and making sure that ultimately we can not only worry about the economic, but balance the environmental as well? As we looked at this entire area, we realized that there were several other landowners that not only wanted to be part of this, but had an interest in those two goals as well, protecting conservation and also the economic side of this as well. So it was mentioned earlier, we have the train already coming through. People ask this all the time, what is a port going to look like? I don't see us building any additional rail. That we're not going into this with the idea of building any additional rail. As Chris alluded to, the causeway was built in 1959. I was looking earlier today, I think we've actually had rail in the area since 1902. We do not foresee building any more rail in West Weber. The question is, how do we use the existing rail that's already there? We have a main line. We also have short line service as well. So how do we use that area? We realized that part of the rail was actually coming out of that original plot of land that we had included in the initial jurisdictional area. We're looking, as we looked at where that rail went to, including the land, looking at that dual goals and alignments again, we felt like it was best to include this. And quite frankly, part of that was because we realized that we could do a good job protecting the wetlands. We realized that development could help pay for, again, which is a very innovative model, the development could actually help to pay for the protection of those wetlands. So we've got 3% of the returns coming into this that we're proposing to be used for the protection of the wetlands up here. We think it's about $10 to $11 million over the next 20 years or so. So again, as we looked at that comprehensively, we felt like this was the best approach.
Thank you, Ben.
What size is it? You went from...
We're 9,400 acres now.
9,000.
9,000.
9,000 acres.
Let me just add too that the majority of that property.
It's not developable.
The majority of that property was already zoned industrial by the county. I think, Stephanie, like 30 plus years ago, as a general master plan, that this would be the next phase for job creation for northern Utah. So it's been earmarked. Can I say that, for a long time? We haven't had the need for it as our economy has moved further north. If you look at northern Utah, the two big industrial centers are Freeport Center in Clearfield, which is full, and the BDO Industrial Center in Ogden, which is 90% full. So you say to yourself, well, where are we going to have our next generation of advanced manufacturing? Because that's kind of what our specialty is up here in northern Utah. Where do we employ people so they don't have to out-migrate to, say, for example, to Salt Lake County? We still have a significant out-migration of workers from Davis and Weber to Salt Lake County. in the order of between 50 and 75,000 workers per day. Now, I would say that's not sustainable over the next 10 to 20 years. What we'd like to do is create job centers up here so people can live, work, and play in the regions where they live. And I think that's what this master plan speaks to. If you talk to Stephanie Russell, nobody is more excited about clean environment, clean energy, clean industrial than Stephanie at the county. You should have a conversation with her. So everything the county is doing is leaning toward having a very high-tech industrial product. Of course, we have to meet all of the air attainment goals anyway, so it's not like you could do something significantly in that other direction that you wouldn't want to see. So this is really our opportunity to create the next job creation center that your children, your grandchildren can have a place to work at and not maybe have to commute, say, 30 minutes to 60 minutes for their next job.
Thank you, Chris. Barbara?
Stephanie, can we dive just a little bit more into that? There's
Yeah,
a little bit more
sure.
information.
Barbara, if you don't mind waiting
provided
just a
there.
second.
Sorry, Barbara. Can we switch over to the map on the screen? So I think this could answer a number of other people's questions.
Are you going to discuss what's actually developable?
No.
Oh, okay.
So this is the unincorporated area. You can kind of see in colors the surrounding incorporated cities. That's the existing zoning map. You see that big blob of purple out west. That's the M3 zone that Chris was talking about. This is today's zoning map. In the middle, you kind of see a little bit of purple there. That's actually the project that Daniel is working on. That's a newer M&T zone. That's a very light manufacturing and technology zone. Everything's supposed to be happening indoors, not outdoors. It won't be heavy on dust, smoke, vibration, air quality issues. And we're hoping to get some renewable energy out of that as well. But that is the 1966 zoning map.
Exactly.
I just wanted to show you that there isn't a difference. There's a very small difference you can see up in the corner of that M3 zone. This has been in the plan since 1966. The buzzword today is inland port, but for the last 50-something, 60-something years, the area has been planned for industrial and manufacturing types of uses. It just hasn't materialized because there have been plenty of other spaces along the Wasatch Front for these uses to occur. Those places are being built out. And so there is a push for new places to be found. For better or for worse, there's just a push for it to occur. And then one more. That's the future land use map that the general plan adopted. So we look at a little bit more of that purple out to the west, but for the most part, we're looking at that big green blob that surrounds it. We're doing everything we can with that big green blob to make sure that we're not seeing big industrial development encroach into the important migratory bird areas and wildlife areas that are in the western Weber area. Trying to keep that open, trying to keep it natural and usable for the wildlife that's in the area. We've also looked at the Weber River corridor, and we've just adopted a new ordinance that says 300 feet from the higher water line on both sides, so a 600-foot plus wide swath of that river corridor cannot be developed. You can't put buildings inside of that area. I wish it was a little bit more. I would continue to encourage the county to think about it a little bit more than that, but that area is intended to be natural, by and large natural, with a few parks and open space for people who move into the area, but for the most part, natural with maybe a pedestrian trail that runs along it. And that is for the sheer importance of the wildlife, that riparian corridor that the wildlife enjoy along that area as well, coming into the Ogden Bay and coming out of the Ogden Bay. We've got 7 smart growth strategies that we've adopted in the plan. Any development that comes in out here will need to speak to these smart growth strategies. Number 1 is street connectivity. 2 is pathway and trail connectivity. 3 is open space and recreational facilities. 4, dark sky considerations. One of the most important things we could do for wildlife, especially migratory bird species, is to protect the dark sky of the western Weber area. A lot of my colleagues are saying that's kind of a futile task with the Wasatch Front where it is and all the lights that are already out there. Well, we could try and not do worse. We can try and not pollute more. And so we're working really hard with development as it's being proposed now. Most of it's residential in nature now, to implement dark sky strategies so we don't see worse sky glow as development moves further west. Culinary and secondary water conservation planning is incredibly important, not just for the lake levels, but for water uses for the human population as well. We know that the governor and the legislature is really going strong on trying to make sure the lake doesn't dry out, and we should be continuing to advance those efforts as well. 6 and 7, emissions and air quality control and renewable energy. And that's why I wanted to make sure I said something real quick on that, because as we get into renewable energies, we're looking to developers to look to find ways to put in smart renewable energy strategies into the developments, both residential and commercial. Rooftop solar, we're what, the first or second most arid state in the nation. We've got a really good solar index, and so there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking towards photovoltaic solar farms. We got 350 plus acres zoned for a solar overlay zone in this Western Weber area right now. So we're looking to try and find ways to speak right to those questions on how do we make sure we do this in the least impactful way, least impactful to the environment, but also least impactful to the people who live there now and the people who will live there in the future. Sorry, is my 3 minutes up?
Yes, but thank you, Charlie. Barbara.
Can I go home now?
Please come forward.
I'm Barbara McConville. I'm a native of Ogden and an Ogden City resident, and you've answered some of the questions I've came along with. But I'm just wondering how the municipalities around the inland port and in this area have been communicated with, because in my discussions with some Ogden City Council people, as well as other interested parties, they're pretty much in the dark about what Weber County is doing. It hasn't been on the WACOG agenda. So that's a concern of mine, but mainly, have you looked at the cumulative effects that all of the inland ports you're working on along the I-80, I-15 corridor are going to impact the Wasatch Front? So there's 4 that are already approved, plus Weber County, which is big. And, how is that going to affect our traffic? Have you done studies? What are you planning on doing? And how's all of that information going to impact your decisions?
I'll speak very, very briefly to the communication regarding the cities. They have been communicated with. I actually met with West Haven last night, but that has been something that we have been communicating with the cities throughout the whole process. But I'm going to let Ben answer your bigger question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The impact of the inland ports that are being developed across the state. And so we actually now have 8 total. If the West Weber County project is approved, it will be the 9th. Let me say why we're expanding the way we are and ultimately what we're hoping to try and accomplish. Utah has a love affair with cars, and it's really not good. I was late, a couple minutes late tonight because I was caught behind traffic, yet again. I think this is something that we all live with. Utah has a higher percentage of trucks on the road compared to any other state in the country. Meaning we've got more heavy commercial trucks on our road than any other state as a percentage. We also, just as an interesting tidbit, in terms of like air cargo, 92% of our air cargo actually leaves our market on a truck to go to LAX or to Denver or to other area airports. In terms of our transportation system, we've got a great road system. We've really built a tremendous road system here in the state of Utah, but that is going to fail us. It's going to fail communities that are not along those major thoroughfares. It's also going to fail our environment in terms of air quality and other issues. So for us, as we look at that impact, what we're really trying to do is to say, and this I think is ultra present here in West Weber, when you've got limited ways in and limited ways out, you can't do everything on a car. It's just not smart, and I don't think we would want to. So the question is, how do we put more on rail? We talk about public transportation and front runner all the time as being means to help alleviate traffic on the roadways. What we're trying to do is say, okay, cargo is a major component of what is happening on our roads. So how do we ensure that we're being as efficient and growing as smart as we can? And so as we're looking at this, to your question, has there been a statewide impact? As we have looked at how we want to grow, we have commissioned a study. We're spending $1.5 million on it to make sure that it gets done right. And ultimately that will help us to better understand that impact. But some of the things we already know is we have not grown as efficiently as we could. We probably don't use our water as efficiently as we could. We're not using our roadways as efficiently as we can. We're not using air, other things. So as we're looking at across the state, yes, we have done good studies. We're continuing to do additional studies, but the things we know tell us we have to get smarter about our freight corridors and ultimately how we're moving goods in and out of the state. We can't continue to put everything on roads. It's too expensive. We can't build our way out of that. So that's how I'd respond to your question, if that's okay.
But you can't, if you build these inland ports, I mean, you can't force whoever's working in them to use rail.
No.
I mean, and so that puts more trucks on the roads because you're building all these inland ports. So it's increasing and increasing with not.
I would argue that the inland port's going to make more opportunities to use rail as opposed to 12th Street. And I would also argue that you've seen the M3 designation out there. Industrial development is going to take place out there. And from my perspective, with the inland port as a state partner with their resources, it's going to be done better, more efficiently. There'll be more resources brought together. It'll be done in a less fragmented way. And there'll be smarter ways to use the rail. That particular UP rail line, from my estimation, is underutilized right now. We should be using that more. There's a rail spur there that only serves 2 customers. And so we've got a lot of opportunity to use that rail line and, to Ben's point, take some of that traffic off the roads.
And let me just real quickly. So the question, is that ultimately going to create more traffic? So if you think about it now, I think people think, well, you can load rail anywhere in the state of Utah. You really can't. Really, you have to load kind of in the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, which is putting a ton of stress on the roads around the airport and kind of on the west side of Salt Lake City. That's an area that is already economically distressed, underserved communities. So as an example, we gave a loan to RailSync for a facility in Cedar City. BZI Steel, quite literally, was shipping all of their steel into the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, putting it on a truck, and then shipping it via truck down to Cedar City. They now are getting their loads brought directly to their facility, and no more trucks on the road. For every one rail car they're bringing in, it's about 4 trucks off the road. That's much more efficient, but there was literally nowhere in southwestern Utah you could load a rail. You could load rail. So by creating that facility, and part of our deal is they have to keep it open, and meaning work with everybody, we want more volume going on the rail as opposed to having to come up to one single point and join on there. So that's more the concept that we're looking for.
Thank you. Sarah.
My name is Sarah Rushforth. I'm an aquatic ecologist with a degree from Johns Hopkins in aquatic ecology. My first concern is that it's the ecologists down here and the private property owners up there. My question, which I'll make quick, I have a series of them. This is the West WEBER project plan, a draft. It acknowledges that there is a required environmental analysis before this moves forward. My question is, have you seen the results of that? And have you seen how the 19 threatened migratory bird species are going to be impacted? And have you requested any follow-up information on that? This is not an environmental impact statement that's in this draft. The resulting recommendation here about those 19 species is that construction should be conducted outside of breeding season. So I'm wondering how you feel about that, and if you've requested any further information, or if you've actually seen an environmental impact statement.
Sure. So just quickly, your comment on an EIS is typically something that's related to NEPA, which is federal jurisdiction. So an EIS would be required as you're getting into federal requirements ultimately that would trigger the NEPA.
Right.
We're not triggering any of the NEPA rules here. And we are looking, I mean, I know there's been a petition more recently for one of the nesting bursts, the Wilson Phalarope.
Yes.
And so, yes, we have called that out in our most updated version of the plan. We do have an environmental review that is included in that project area plan and budget. If there's additional things that you would like to see in that type of, we would love to hear your feedback and ultimately.
That's great. What is my forum? I've worked on the microbiology of Great Salt Lake and Utah Lake for 20 plus years, and this is where I am and this is where you are. So what is my forum to address these things with you?
Please, blh@utah.gov. Send me an email. I'd love to follow up.
Absolutely. You'll hear from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Nancy?
Nancy had to leave, but she gave me her.
Oh, sure. Do you mind stating your name?
Yeah, I am Harvey Day. I live in Ogden. My question is, what studies have been carried out to determine what forms of life are currently living on the land proposed for development between Ogden Bay and Harold Crane waterfowl management areas? These wetlands are the historic home of some of northern Utah's rarest plants, like the federally listed endangered species Spiranthes diluvialis, the Ute lady's tresses orchid, as well as many other species of migratory birds and nesting birds who live there. It only makes sense that we should know and have record of what species are going to be permanently destroyed if this land is developed. Would you agree that we owe at least that to the future generations of people who might wonder what was once beneath this 14 square mile expanse of concrete? If these studies have already been carried out, please let the attendees know how they can access those records. If no such biological surveys have been done, what is the plan to carry out these surveys before the project is voted on this coming Monday, 4 days from now, when you vote on this, UEPA? If there is no plan, why are you making this decision? Thanks.
All good questions. Thank you for asking them. We definitely don't want to see any kind of endangered species go extinct because of any of the projects we're working on here, whether it's inland port, residential, or otherwise. There is a federal process, fortunately. I think some developers would say unfortunately, but from my perspective, fortunately, where there are protections for certain species, and once those species are known to exist, they have to halt their work, and we have to do that full inspection of what may be there and what may not be there. I do take a little bit of issue with the thought that this is going to be a 14 square mile expanse of concrete. It will not be. That's a lie. And it's not yours. It was told to you by somebody else, I'm sure. So this is, we want to urge caution with that kind of language, because this isn't just paving paradise for a parking lot. That's not what we're here to do. It's not what Weber County is here to do. It's not what the County Commission stands for. It's not what the Planning Division stands for. And I'm sure it's not what the Port stands for. So we've got to find a way to work with nature. One of the questions of truck traffic and isn't this just going to increase truck traffic? I think my answer to that question will probably be yes, but it will increase infinitely more if we don't do something closer to rail. And so speaking to the other question, will this area be developed in the future? Yes, absolutely. What will be developed here in the future? That's part of the question of the day. Is it going to be a bunch of houses with backyards? Not a lot of endangered species spaces in backyards. Or will it be done with care by folks who have the resources to take care of it? Working with Daniel and his group, I like his donation of the 30 some odd acres of that wetlands to the Park District. That was something that we draw a firm line in the sand on. We need that area to be protected. We want that area to be protected because there are species there that are important. Whether they're endangered or not, they're important. And we want to make sure that they're taken care of. Now, the site that Daniel's putting his project on, not as much. And there are studies that do show that. And so making sure that we separate where the concrete's going to go versus where the natural spaces need to remain is going to be very important to the process. And there is a process set up for that.
why is the process not happening before the project is approved?
You got to know what you're going to build before you know how to do it. You got to know the geography of what's going in, the configuration of what's going
And
in.
the biology of the land before it's approved?
So
Can I just clarify, for every project area, before the project area gets approved by our board, I conduct an environmental review, which lists what species may be present in the project area. Yeah, sure.
Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mona Smith. I'm the Environmental and Sustainability Director at the Utah Inland Port Authority. And I'm just going to flip around so you can see me. Sorry, because that's kind of awkward. So before any UIPA project area gets approved by our board, I conduct an environmental review that identifies threatened endangered species as well as their critical habitats. Just to clarify, this proposed project area does not overlap or include any critical habitats for threatened or endangered species. So what you're looking at right there is actually a report from DNR. That's they include, or
It's a report from DNR that you've included as your environmental review of the species.
that is just one small portion of my environmental review.
Why is the rest of it in here?
I list the threatened and endangered species that may be present in. No, have you read the entire environmental review section? It's well over.
This is your appendix E.
Then there is a section on threatened and endangered species that talk. No, you're looking at a different section, my friend.
What was your study?
I'm happy to give you my card. What I do is I review publicly available data. I do a desktop review. It's similar to a phase 1 environmental site assessment. It doesn't go into quite as much detail as a phase 1 ESA, but it does get close. What I have access to is publicly available data that is
It's a review of data.
It's an environmental review. Yes, thank you. So, and just to clarify, there are no critical habitats for any threatened or endangered species located. I did not survey the land. That is the responsibility of each property owner.
That's the responsibility of the property owner and the developer when they go through the development process.
it'll happen on a site-by-site basis with specific development plans. You need to know what the development plans are so you know where you're looking.
And that's state and federal regulation.
Yeah, I would just add to that, maybe Mr. Stevens can speak to this as well. Separate and independent from the Utah Inland Port, any developer who wants to put together a project on some industrial ground is going to go have the same checklist, independent of the Utah Inland Port. Wetland studies, engineering studies, archaeological studies,
Yep.
all of those endangered species studies, they would do that whether that's in a port, whether that's in the inland port or not. So I think it's a little unfair to sort of pin that on the Utah Inland Port. Any developer who would come out there, look at that M3 zoning and want to conduct a potential project area would have a similar checklist with or without the port. The port just simply makes all of us as an economic development team better and smarter to get projects done more efficiently. Daniel, would
And
you
once
like to
again,
address that?
the inland port is a partnership. They're not driving the they're not.
To be clear, I'm not pinning just that on UEBA. I'm pinning that on.
It doesn't fall on the county. It falls on these are private properties.
Including the private
Yeah.
property owners.
So that's up to them. That's up to them if they want to develop their properties, and when they decide to develop their properties, then that process is triggered.
And what kind of oversight are the private property developers subject?
Local, state, federal.
So they have to hire a federal, for example, they have to hire.
It depends on the project. It depends on the project. It truly depends on the project. That's a development process, and it would depend on the project.
Is it different projects or is it all one project?
Different projects.
Different projects.
Pretend like this isn't a port. Port's the buzzword. Port's the thing that we're looking at, this big, huge, expansive area.
That's what you're calling it.
we're
Well,
calling.
I think the confusion may be here
Yeah.
that, when you talk about adopting a port, a lot of people think that you're pre-approving the construction of a bunch of concrete buildings.
Right.
Which is what we've heard a lot of.
That's
In
the mixed message
In
that's been sent.
reality, you have this overlay zone of the inland port, but every single developer, as they go to build a project, has to go through a formal process that includes, the local, state, and federal requirements. So that, I think we got to separate the two out, because like our project, prior to the port even getting involved, we went through that process and went through a rezone with the county, but we engaged with our environmental consultants. We did phase 1 analyses. We did all the third geotechnical and all the studies to make sure that our project would be developable and compliant with all state, local, and federal laws, and to make sure that we weren't impacting, those things. Then, and the areas that we did identify as true jurisdictional delineated wetlands, we talked about, we donated land for a park and things like that. So every developer, as they go through that process, like Charlie said, if the port was involved or not, they're still going to have to go through the same process.
So where can we access all of these records that y'all have of all of the studies that have been conducted?
Stephanie, can we move on? Can we move on?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we'll address that with you after. That's
I'd like to know as well.
okay. We'll address that. We're going to parking lot that question, and we're going to move on to the next question. We will address that individually. Gretchen.
My name is Gretchen Parker. I live in Roy, Utah. I've lived in northern Utah my whole life. And my concern, I am a pediatric ICU nurse at Primary Children's, and the amount of pediatric cancers that we've seen in the last few years is getting way more than it should be. Our oncology unit is overflowing. Our ICU is full. Our poor little asthmatics come in. They can't breathe. Utah's always had bad air, but it's getting so bad. And I'm worried about my future children, grandchildren. These kids can't breathe, and it's getting worse. They can't even go outside on break. And to end the pediatric cancers, it's very heartbreaking. And I am worried about the increase in the semi trucks and the traffic coming in and what it's going to do to our already really bad air. I appreciate that you're looking at rails, because Ogden is called Junction City for a reason. So I appreciate that, but you've lived here 2 years. I'm worried about the future of our children. This is not the Utah I wanted to live in. I didn't want to live in California. I wanted to live here.
Thank you, Gretchen. Does anyone, Charlie? Or-
Yeah, so we're trying hard from a county level to make sure we've got quality growth standards in place so that we can minimize the amount of pollution that's being produced, both from truck traffic and from buildings. For example, one of the things that we're implementing in our development review processes is a requirement for buildings to be built at higher efficiencies. We do have a lot of pollution coming from vehicles. We have more coming from houses and from buildings. And so we want to make sure buildings are efficient. We've already lost one potential large industrial user out west because they could not meet the attainment standards that we need to meet. And so they're not welcome here, both by the state of Utah and by ourselves, because they cannot keep the air quality clean. The requirement for us is to make sure that we are meeting that standard. Both, when I say us, I mean all of us. I mean the people who are moving in and building, as well as the government watchdogs, as well as the state who are watching the government who is watching those others. So we're trying. Growth is happening. Work as a pediatric nurse. My hat's off to you. A lot of kids. We keep having them. And they need somewhere to be, and they need somewhere to work. That just is. That's absolutely true. And so as growth happens, we need to figure out how exactly we're going to deal with this in a healthy and least impactful way to the environment and to our health. And I'm with you. It's hard to breathe, and we definitely need to take care of that.
And Gretchen, moving here from Atlanta, the air quality here is significantly worse than the South, and it really is truly, it's one of my pet projects here. This is outside the port area, but will be included in some of the port as we move forward. Is currently we're harvesting methane out of our closed landfills. We're doing a pilot program right now in one of the Weber County landfills. We're expanding that into some of our cities. Weber County and the Commission, as well as my department, takes air quality very seriously, and we take renewable energies very seriously. We've got significant plans for that in the port area in the West Weber corridor to implement renewable energies as we're building and developing out there, as well as smart water practices, working very closely with Weber Basin Water and the utilities out there. So we're starting to see some of this paradigm shift happen in our community, and it's important. And I just want you to know that what Charlie's saying is very important to the Commission, and it's very important to the staff here that we look at these types of preventative measures to mitigate some of the things that we have inherited. L.C. Allen? Did I read that correctly?
Hi, my name's Alan Jones. I'm a resident of Ogden. I'm a fifth-generation Utahite, Ogdenite, actually. I got some quick questions. By your own admission, the zoning in this area was done in the 60s, back when no one cared one whit about environmental anything. I want to know if you guys have considered, the Weber County Commission considered maybe readdressing and seeing if that zoning really fits with the conservation mindset we're hoping that we're moving into. Second of all, you mentioned the difference between some of the studies that were done in the early 80s versus today. That is a serious problem illustrated by a fluctuating lake level. Back in the 80s, we had one of the higher historic lake levels. I mean, very small time scale historic high lake levels. And that is an issue of which I want to know if has been addressed. Water can come up, water can come down. Bad things can happen in both. Third, traffic. You're suggesting, you've mentioned truck traffic, but I didn't quite catch the number, but you're talking about a significant number of people who are going to be working in this area. Okay, what have you planned and addressed to getting those people to and from work without getting additional cars on the road? This seems like we're looking at a lot of the positives and sort of theirs, and we're not necessarily addressing some of the realistic negatives, of which you're stuck in traffic. This is going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great questions. You want to go first?
Well, I will lead just for a minute and then turn it to my friend Charlie here, because he was instrumental in putting together Weber County's new updated master plan, which goes really all the way from I-15 out through all of that West Weber jurisdiction out to, Compass Minerals and Western Draconian. So it's a very well thought out plan that has let him address the specifics of that. In terms of transportation, I would add also that there is plans, Stephanie can address this as well, for the widening of 12th Street, which eventually turns into 900 South. In addition to that, the West Davis Corridor freeway system, which now has been expanded to Syracuse, will eventually be expanded to 12th Street. There's probably about a 10-year time horizon on that, but it's already being studied and underway. That'll provide another outlet going south, and I think eventually that also goes north, doesn't it, on the 20-year plan? So you'll see that parallel system to I-15 creating another transportation district along with the expansion of 12th Street. But Charlie, I would think that if everybody here hasn't seen the county's master plan, they should read that. It's very well done.
Sorry, I understand the rules, but I cannot hold my tongue anymore. I actually live out in Warren. We moved out there because it is the country. It is the last place that is country left in northern Utah. I'm going to look at West Haven. I've only been in Utah for about 10 years, so I am kind of a new guy here. When I first moved here in 2005, West Haven was a small, quaint town that was still country but modernizing. I understand Utah has to modernize to stay into the 21st and the future centuries. But if you bring sewer out there, just like West Haven, that means apartments are coming, low-income housing by federal and state law. So when does it stop? We're talking about one thing here, but with every decision, every vote, there's a second, third order effect that happens.
Okay, sir, we're going to answer this gentleman's question, and then we'll come to you after we've gone through the other people that have signed up. So, thank you.
I'll sneak some answers in for you.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of similar, so we'll get you some.
The M3 zone, I couldn't tell you whether or not it's been reconsidered or will be reconsidered. It's kind of been a foregone conclusion as far as I can understand it. It's a policy consideration and question, I think, for the county commissioners. We didn't ask them, and we didn't suggest that they reconsider it. It's kind of been understood that has been what the folks who are living out in that area and who own property out in that area have been expecting. And so it just wasn't asked whether or not it should happen. And it's a great question to ask. I think it is. As far as studies go on floodplain area, the map that I showed you, which is intended to be the future land use map, and it's one that it's important to study, especially if you live in the area. It's important to study so you can see what is planned to be coming in your direction. The floodplain area was mapped on there, and we are not planning any kind of development happening in that floodplain area. It's the 1982 flood, I believe, is what what FEMA is using as the high water for the flood plain. So that remains shown on the map, and there's very little development that's planned inside those areas. If there is any development that does occur in those areas, they've got to go through the FEMA process. We've got some pretty strict floodplain development regulations already in place that really makes a lot of the development cost prohibitive. But if somebody wants to try and overcome that cost, they've got to go through the federal process to do so and work with FEMA. Significant amounts of people working and perhaps moving here. It's a great observation. How are we going to get them to work? Are they all going to be on the streets? I sure the heck hope not. So one thing in the general plan that we're really trying hard to do is avoid the addiction that we have to automobiles. We're trying to avoid that eventuality that everybody needs to have a 3-car garage at some point in the future. It's unreasonable, it's unrealistic, and it's important that we're all focused on that. One of the things that we do have in the plan is we've got along that rail corridor, we are going to be working with landowners who choose to develop their land over time to provide additional rail corridor for light rail or similar kinds of rail. Now, at first, it might just be a glorified bike lane, but in time, we hope maybe bus rapid transit takes over. But once we got that space reserved, we're very hopeful that turns into a light rail system. I have to say very hopeful because we don't control that. We're not the transit authority. That's the UTA. And unless Weber County wants to get in the business of being a transit authority, we've got to rely on UTA to do what's in the best interest of the community. So we're hoping and we're planning for it. We're going to carve space for it. And we're going to hope that those other agencies decide to fill in and participate. You want me to stop?
Are you able to address a little bit of what?
So there is a lot of development that is planned out in that particular area, Reese, Warren, as well as the obvious areas of Taylor and West Weber. I say obvious because there's already sewer there, but you're right. Once sewer comes across the river and it's more useful, that's just one less impediment to development happening. That is something that the County Commission was very sensitive to, understanding, and wanted to make sure that we addressed good quality planning, knowing that. Is it going to change? Yeah, it'll change, and they're very sympathetic to the idea that it will change because a lot of folks don't want it to happen. And we get that. We know that they don't want it to happen, but we can't seem to stop having kids, and we can't seem to stop being economically. Sorry to you guys. I've only got one, so I feel like I'm not part of the problem either. But we can't stop being economically successful around here either. We're a victim of our own success, and so people want to be here. Including the kids. And so I think the commissioners have to make a choice. If you look in the paper today, you'll read something about moderate income housing, affordable housing, what the governor wants to do about that. One of the statements that Steve Waldrop, the governor's appointee for housing, keeps mentioning is we're all at fault for the success that we're reaping. Because we're all having kids and we're all enjoying the benefits of the economic vitality the state of Utah is having. Those kids got to go somewhere. And so do the kids the kids of those kids. And so we've got to plan appropriately. Some areas are going to grow. I think that's the hard fact. We're just trying to do it the right way so it's least impactful.
So the short answer to my question is there is a plan to fully develop Weber, Warren, West Warren, that whole area right there, Taylor, fully incorporate it with whatever city and turn it into West Haven.
No, maybe not West Haven. Maybe it'll be its own city. I hope it can be its own city because
meaning housing.
Turning into the mess that is now West Haven.
there's a potential for that to happen. Yes.
Yes. Lynn?
Fair.
Are you still there? Thanks, Lynn.
Yes, that's me. Hello, I'm Lynn Carroll, and I live in Ogden. I've been trying to decide between my questions about, I'll talk about air pollution. We don't know what businesses will end up being attracted to the area. We can guess, just from the things you've said so far, that there'll be a lot more train and truck traffic. And the UEPA project area plan talks about attracting new rail users, as in exporters of stuff by rail, I guess. I have a couple of questions related to that. One came up from what you said earlier about requiring filtration, and it sounded like you thought you were going to filter the whole airscape and get rid of pollution. I suppose that's not true.
I wish.
And
we don't have that technology.
The other is with more rail, is that going to mean more of these very polluting, and I can't remember the term for it now, the switchers?
Oh,
locomotive switchers.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the question was, with any type of port development, will that bring the type of switcher engine? So the switchers are commonly the engines that stay in a yard and ultimately provide the service, shunting things around. And so, no, where we're just trying to better utilize existing rail, there might be a little bit more service on the existing lines, but I don't think we're anticipating getting to the point where you're going to see like the Roper Yard down in Salt Lake City or the Union Pacific Intermodal or anything of the gravity in downtown Ogden here as well. So I don't know that there ever will be switchers in this area. They may be, but I will say we have asked the providers in the state, both Tier 1 and Tier 3, Class 1 and Class 3, to step up to the plate and do more efficient. Union Pacific's done a really good job with that. We hope the other as well. That's not just a here situation, that's other places across the state. But we want to see the most efficient switchers here in the state of Utah, not only to benefit this area, but other areas as well.
Thank you.
I would love to see electric. I wonder if we'll see hydrogen before we'll see electric. Those platforms, I think where they can be used, people will try and use them. It's right now they have not proven that they can actually get the job done. And so as that technology becomes more robust, absolutely. I hope we do see zero emissions. We are applying, the port is applying for the EPA Clean Port program. we're applying for 150 million. Not sure we're going to get that much, but that's all focused on zero emission. And so we would really like to see those opportunities of more efficient equipment here in the state of Utah.
Thank you, Ben. Amelia?
Yeah, I'm Amelia Jones. I'm an Ogden resident, Weber County resident. I do have a question. I have a few questions. One is, I'm Mr. Stevens, perhaps you could really address exactly what kind of businesses we think are coming in. I know that generally, what I've heard tonight sounds like they're going to be generally industrial. Industrial can be noisy, can be vibrational. This property is it's a sensitive area. It's between two big waterfowl areas. And, these migratory flyways are super important, and they've shrunk. There really are very few left in the United States, which can cause problems for nature. And nature is one of the reasons this area has grown so much. That's not a mystery. This is that. And I have a lot of you said there's no infrastructure out there, but this partnership, as I understand it, is going to cost us money, and it's also going to put infrastructure in where other people couldn't afford. You might not be able to afford to do the infrastructure to develop your land. And so this is going to guarantee that land gets developed. And, someone else said, should it even be developed? Should it have been zoned that way in the first place to be developed? And I think that should be considered by the commission. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that, and correct me if I am under the wrong impression that part of what the deal is that we're going to pay for that infrastructure.
That is completely inaccurate.
And we're going to get something back for it, because I know there's the TIF and all that kind of stuff, and that might not be the thing, but that's why I'm asking.
I'd be happy to address that with you offline as well.
Yeah, so those are my three questions. I think you got them.
Thanks.
Great question.
Yeah,
Daniel,
great.
go ahead.
Happy to address that. A lot of the types of tenants that we're working with are attracted by Weber County and the workforce that's here. It's very skilled. It's got a lot of advanced capabilities, and they want to locate next to that. And like Chris talked about earlier, a lot of our workforce goes to Salt Lake County because that's where the jobs are, the good, high-paying jobs are. And so they drive to Salt Lake County, where some of those employers that are located now in Salt Lake County would prefer to be here, where they can be in closer proximity to their workforce. So you're going to see a lot of types of users that you're seeing in Salt Lake County, but locating closer to the workforce. But in our site in particular, we have a lot more strict guidelines than some other areas in our zoning. And so everything like was addressed earlier, everything on our site has to be done indoors. There can't be any outdoor storage, can't be loud, noisy, stinky, or anything like that. So ours will be more of a commerce business park style with everything done indoors. And then maybe I'm going to talk briefly to the comment about the costs.
Sure.
So as this functions, we as a development community, we put in the cost up front. And then as we generate value from the baseline of today, so the property tax is today is locked in. As we build a building and create value on the property, we enter into an agreement with the port, in this case, that we will get a reimbursement for a portion of that. So there's nothing that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. It's actually the development community that puts the money in up front and then gets a reimbursement via a percentage of the value that we create via the development. So if we don't do anything, we don't get any money back from this, and we have to put it in up front and get reimbursed via that increment. So it is a common misunderstanding that taxpayers are paying for this stuff.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm Mike McConville.
Yeah.
But I read or heard somewhere that a portion of the county property tax would go to support the Port Authority for this project.
No, that's incorrect. Yeah, that's incorrect, and it's a common misconception. of how tax increment finance works. Tax increment finance, and I'll go ahead, Ben, if you want to go dive into that a little bit as it relates to the port. Tax increment finance is exactly what Daniel said. It's an increment that's generated by the project on that particular tax parcel that the project is located on. So they're getting a reimbursement based on an agreement on what they're going to be developing out. So it's never paid for by the general taxpayer. That's money that wouldn't exist without the project, and it's very specific to that parcel that the project is on. So it doesn't affect anybody's property tax in the county at all.
Except for the parcel owner.
Except for the parcel owner. And it ends up being a reimbursement. And in the case of the county, our financial incentives as it relates to tax increment, we basically will not do any types of deals without having that go back as public infrastructure. So the public is actually benefiting from the developers coming in. They're getting infrastructure, needed infrastructure, and not paying at all for it.
And the commissioners wanted to make sure last time we had this conversation, it was very clear to the public, this isn't a tax liability that they want to put on anyone else but those who are developing.
Correct.
You want to make sure that's clear.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Ben, didn't you say $1.5 million is going to be the cost?
$1.5 million.
I know you said it earlier.
Oh, no. So that is the general study, the inland port as a whole, our organization across the state, the statewide study. And so the money that is generated, and I think Stephanie did a great job explaining this, the money that is generated by the actual parcels that will be developed here in West Weber by state code. So it has to stay in this project area. So it doesn't take in money from other parts of the county, and it cannot leave this area either. So there's no going back. We're not taking county dollars and redistributing somewhere else in the state. It's all staying here for the benefit of this project area.
Sure.
My name is Mary McKinley. I'm an Ogden City resident. You've talked about there are various private landowners and various projects. And what are the projects? Who are the landowners? And how is everybody going to be coordinated and ensure that the standards set are being met?
That is a fantastic question.
Great question.
That's a really good question.
I think it goes to the other question that the gentleman in the back
this
had.
gentleman, that's a great question. Charlie, you want to go and grab that? And
Yeah, I can
Ben, if you want to jump into.
take a stab at it as best I can. There are a lot of landowners out there right now, and the landowners who are out there right now could probably be considered just as good as anyone else who might buy their land as those future project owners until they sell those properties. So I wish I had a way of showing our parcel map, but I mean I could show you how many different parcels there are in that area. How do they coordinate? Well, first off, when it comes to going through the port process, they'll have that process, but I suspect you may be asking, how do they coordinate from a land use, environmental quality perspective with the county to make sure that they're doing what they should be doing? So we do have specific processes for that. First off, they've got to go through a subdivision process if they're splitting their property into separate parcels. Through that process, we make sure we address with them how infrastructure is going to work, how their impact to their neighborhood is going to work, noise, sights, smells, sounds, all that, plus make sure that the property gets platted appropriately in clean ways so that there's not questions about property ownership in the future. Once that is done, and that takes several months for them to do, so there's a lot of studies that go into that, including environmental studies that need to go into that if there are environmental resources on the property that need to be addressed.
Or cultural.
Yeah, thank you. Resources, yeah, public resources. I would just say, just casting a wide net over that. And then after that, they go through a very specific site plan process where they'll bring in on a parcel by parcel basis, they'll bring in what their plan is. So in Daniel's case, the plan is to put several different buildings in several different locations. He went through the master planning process, got a development agreement. His next step will be that subdivision process. He'll have to build the roads that are going into his project. And so we'll be watching that very closely. And then once all of his parcels are created, he'll be submitting site plan review to the county. Through site plan review, we check on parking, we check again on noise, vibration, site sound smells, issues with neighborhood challenges, incompatible uses, all that kind of stuff. And once that passes muster, we've got a big long list of standards they've got to meet in our ordinances. After that, he's got to go through another process. He's got to get a building permit. And once he gets that building permit, he's going to have to address air quality, emissions, building efficiencies. He's going to have to address what else do you have in there? Res checks, building code compliance, setbacks, verification that fences are the right height. We'll make sure that he puts the trails in that he committed to, that he put the park in that he committed to, that the pond that's right there is up to the threshold and the standard that the park district is looking for from a cleanliness perspective. So there's a lot. I mean, I don't know, start from development agreement to your final occupancy, you're looking at least 10 years, right? I mean, if not more.
So can I ask, is that for a residential project you're doing?
That's an industrial park.
My question is, what kind of industry is going in there? It sounds like he's pretty far down the process, and so we might have an idea what kind of industry.
That's a good question.
My question.
He spoke a little bit to that just a second ago when he was talking about the indoor. He spoke to that. Put indoor, just yeah, it's
indoor industry isn't very
Indoor skilled manufacturing type jobs. I mean, that's
it's all governed by the county's code. He's in his code is MT, and Charlie can talk a little bit about that.
I was asking what kinds of industries are going to go into. That was my question, not.
You know, if you drive through the BDO Industrial Park, not that this will be exactly like that, and you look at their marquee and the kinds of companies that are in there, advanced manufacturing, aerospace companies, food companies, parts-related companies, lots of different industrial companies, all from small users to Fortune 500 companies. You'll see kind of a mix. Those would be similar kinds of companies that would make an inquiry out into the West Weber area for industrial use.
I'm in the aerospace world, been in it all my life since I was 19. Understanding aerospace future is going towards composites. Composites are very harmful to the environment no matter how they're filtered, and they are done indoor, if you will. However, the particles and the stuff has to go somewhere. What is the plan for the manufacturing waste, not human waste? I'm talking waste from manufacturing. She spoke earlier about they were already doing some study or something with the methane in the dumps. Got that. But specifically to these businesses that are doing aerospace manufacturing, missile manufacturing, etc., there is a lot of waste, chemicals that get put into the ground, etc. What is the plan for that?
So we've got, first off, there's several different state and federal regulatory processes that I couldn't even speak to. I'm not qualified to do that. But from a county perspective, we've got several different use types in these heavier manufacturing zones. The M3 zone that I showed you is one of the heavier ones. Which incidentally, just a side conversation, the county commission is interested in decreasing the intensity of that M3 zone. And so right now that zone, if you look at what the intention of that zone was and is as it applies to the 5,000 or so acres that it applies to, is for aerospace, rocket manufacturing, that kind of stuff. And so it's a really intense, heavy zone. I think they'd love to have what Box Elder has. Well, sorry, the authors of that zone back in the 1950s would love to see what Box Elder is doing with rocket parts manufacturing up there. That's not the case anymore here. And the county commission has made that very clear. They want things to be a lot cleaner. So speaking straight to the zone that Daniel has, the manufacturing and tech zone that he has, that's a clean manufacturing and tech zone. And so the heavy industries with the carbons and the toxic, potentially toxic materials wouldn't be allowed in that zone at all. And so going through that review process, like you had asked, what is it that you're doing through that site plan or that conditional use permit review process? He'd have to give us a list of what that is. That's both from the development side, but then when he has a user to come into that building, that user needs to go through a business licensing process, at which point we will verify, do you meet the intention of this code, and do you meet the exact standards of this code? If you don't, you won't get that permit. Once you get further west, where you're talking, out in the M3 zone, we have a process called a conditional use permit process. And in order to get a use out there that is toxic in nature and that requires significant cleanup, you've got to go through that conditional use process. Tell us what you're doing, what we'll explore and discover with you what best practices are, how do we dispose of that, and figure out those best practices. What is the exact plan today? Can't tell you, because every different business is going to be different and they're going to have different needs. And so we address it on a business by business basis.
Thank you, Charlie. We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up for the evening. Gentlemen, you've had your hand up for a while.
Before we go into talking about we're going to build everything.
Can you state your name and where you're from?
Kevin Bailey, I live in West Weber.
Thanks.
Right on 12th Street. I was there for the whole project when we did 12th Street already once before. How are we going to address the traffic issue to get to these projects before we start building them? We've already did the road once. Taxpayers have already paid for that once. Now we're going to have to come back in. Partial. We got to go in and redo it again. What is the plan for building that road, and what is the state's plan for continuing that to take it up there? Because we got a 2-lane road that will not, it's not going to handle the traffic.
It's a great question.
That's a fantastic question.
And how is the taxpayers going to pay for that? You know, what do we got for a budgeting?
Yep.
That's a great question.
Perfect question. I'll speak a little bit to the
good way to end
traffic mitigation. As far as the budgeting and finance go, I might look to you, Steph, on a little bit of that. But the purpose of the West Weber General Plan was to address that specific issue in part was to address that specific issue. We've got a lot of people out on 12th Street who don't want to be the only way in and out of that community, but not only that, it's a safety challenge. If it's the only way in and out, we need to fix that problem. And so one of the important things, I mentioned street connectivity before, one of the important things that we're focusing on is not looking at 12th Street as that future Holy Grail freeway that gets out to this industrial area, but instead looking at other corridors that can get to that area to create closed loops so that there's a little bit of redundancy in the ability to get out there for traffic concerns. So the near-term intention and for the foreseeable future, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't see anything more than what the county improved out there. You shouldn't see any more improvements than what the county has already done. We'll just need to finish off what we started. You know, it ends at 7100. It'll continue out. We've got some funding to continue beyond 7100 from there. Coming back to 4700 West, between 4700 and 1900, the state has already bumped us up on a priority level to get that improved as well to the same standard that you see out where you are. So that's the near term, but what the state said, or what the state asked for or was planning on, was a 5-lane highway at some point in time. And we said, whoa, pump the brakes. The people who live out there don't want to see a 5-lane highway. We don't want to see a 5-lane highway. We need to find some alternatives. And so we're looking at 1800 South, potentially 1600 South. We're working with some developers who are on the south side of the tracks to find ways to make a loop. We're also looking at 700 North, potentially 400/200 South to make some good bridges over the river and those places too. So you get some good loops, but then, and probably the most important thing that this whole thing relies on is the West Weber corridor. There's an alignment that's already been planned. It was planned back in 2009. Steph and I just got off the phone with UDOT earlier today. They're very concerned about the alignment as it's planned, and I think priorities have shifted just a little bit. And so they told us today that they're looking at a few $100,000 that they want to spend to actually reconsider that freeway alignment, because that will be a freeway at some point in time. Right now, the plan is over the next few phases of UDOT phasing is at some point to get it to 12th Street, and then at some point beyond that is to get it to the Box Elder County line and further. What UDOT told Steph and I today is that they want to reevaluate how that's going to go, because right now it crosses some pretty critical wetland area, and they're very concerned about that. And so they're paying attention. We're paying attention. We want to make sure we're cautious, but getting people out and back in a loop manner that doesn't require significant expansions to those roads, that's the key objective that we have there. But
from where I live at, I mean, I've had 4 people die in my front yard. You can come there and do the history on it or whatever you want to do. But a 2-lane road right now is not working right now, let alone add more traffic. I mean, if you come out there on a shift change, it's a racetrack.
Especially to the bridge that's
It's
2 lanes.
a 2-lane road.
Yep.
I mean, it's really a concerned issue before, what is the timeline on that versus the timeline on building? That's my concern, because I mean, I get it, construction, I do it for a living. You know, we're gonna expand. Where are we gonna go? I get it, you know, and everybody's got their right to fight, and everybody's trying to put it in perspective of how it should be. But the concern is making everything aligned.
So last year, we were able to go to the legislature and get the first part of that road that UDOT owns, that 1.9 miles from 1900. We were able to make that a priority project and get it funded. That's supposed to be starting next year. The expansion, the second phase of the expansion of the back part of 12th Street after it turns into 900 South, which is County Road, that has funding for it, and they're anticipating, I think Gary said they were going to start doing the design for that this year and then construction next year.
as far as phasing goes, if you've ever been in the construction industry, that's the silver bullet question of the day. A lot of people go to school for that to try and get everything coordinated, and that's one thing that we're really trying hard to focus on. We are working with developers who own property on the south side of the tracks as well to try and get a way in across the Weber River south of the tracks, so we can get a loop going in that area. But you're asking the right questions, and they're the questions that we're asking as well, both of UDOT, of the railroad, and of our developers. So just trying to make sure everything lines up. I don't have an exact answer for you, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
One really short one.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of people out there. This kind of has to go with Black Pine with your development, and I get you guys wanting to do a park, but have you ever thought about maybe keeping the Western way of life out there and maybe building us an arena or something where we can have rodeos or something instead of a bug-infested park?
Oh, will you please call Commissioner Harvey and ask him that question? He will have a really great answer for you.
I want to answer for Daniel. Have you talked to Joe Giordano over the Park District at all?
No.
They're working on it.
Yeah, that is actually kind of a priority.
Because, I mean, it's like parks out there. We don't have enough DEET to get rid of them mosquitoes.
Yep.
We actually commissioned a plaque for the Western Weber County mosquito so that you could see it and identify it.
Well, folks, we really appreciate your questions and comments tonight, and thank you so much for coming out and sharing some time with us tonight. I left some cards on the back, my business cards. You are welcome to drop me an email, give me a phone call. If there's something that you are desperate to get in front of the commission, I will do my best to facilitate that for you. So everyone have a great night. Thank you very much.
Hey, that's a good reason not to go back.